swag vibe, baby.
Welcome to the Cup of Joe Show, where we explore the journey of recovery from alcohol and drug addiction. One story, one conversation, and one step at a time. I'm your host, Joe, creating a safe space for honest discussions about the challenges and triumphs of addiction and alcoholism. In each episode, we'll hear inspiring stories and uncover tools that make healing possible. Sobriety is not a one-size-fits-all journey, and you don't have to face it alone. Recovery is possible, and it's worth it. Thank you for joining the Cup of Joe Show. Now let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Cup of Joe Show. I'm your host, of course, Joe, and today I'm very excited to have my good friend, Arkansas Brad W. Brad's been sober since March 10th, 2020, and he hails from, I guess you could probably guess this, the Ozarks in Arkansas. Brad is a proud father of 4 amazing kids, grandfather to 5 beautiful grandkids, and the human to 1 very cool cat named Fox. Brad describes himself as a normal kid who did normal things until a life-altering accident left him feeling weak, vulnerable, and unsure of who he was. That's when alcohol and drugs stepped in, giving him the illusion of strength, confidence, and control. But as often happens, what felt good at first became a trap, and eventually addiction took hold in a powerful way. Today, Brad's story is one of resilience, transformation, and grace, from the grips of addiction to a life in recovery. Brad has fought to reclaim his strength, not through substances, but through honesty, connection, and the spiritual tools of sobriety. His journey reminds us that no matter how far we fall, recovery offers a way back, and often a way forward that's even better. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's get into it. How are you doing, Brad?
Good afternoon, Joe. I'm blessed to be here, blessed to be on your show. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, and I'm very excited that you're here. And
yes, sir.
So tell me, what was it like growing up, Brad?
Man, we can think about these things over and over. I wish I'd have just found out about it yesterday, and I wouldn't have had a long enough time to think about it. But I was a normal kid. I had an amazing mom. I got a shout out to my mom on this. Amazing. I love you, Mom. I'm glad to be a part of your life and you a part of my life. But we grew up poor. My mother and my father divorced early. And we lived in Little Rock, Arkansas. And then my mom took us to Poplar Bluff, Missouri. And so we had my mom had custody of us. My dad saw us once a month, and I don't remember anything horrible as a child. I had 2 brothers, and this is back in the day when everybody played outside. There wasn't all the games. We didn't sit in front of the TV, and it's like mom had to call us to come inside, and so me and my brothers, we were competitive. We were competitive with each other in any sport we played. My mom would involve us in track, in soccer, in baseball. And it was always to be better than the other brothers. We fought, we played, we threw mud balls, we went egging, we did all the cool stuff that kids did. And, but I thought it was very exciting, and so, my older brother, Bart, smart, he's smart like my dad. But sometimes I'll refer to him as dickhead smart because he's like so much smarter than me. And I'll try to talk to him. And he'll like be, why don't you understand this? Because he can like read it from a book and like get it, how to take apart an engine. And, it's like, how do you not get this? And it's like me, I'll look at the book. I don't understand it. I try to do it on my own. I screw it up. I try to do it again. I screw it up again. And then it's like, oh, maybe now I'll go to the book and read the instructions and get it that way, And my younger brother, Brett, he's awesome. He has his own path. He lives in Missouri. He was always trying to be better than me and Bart. Of course, he was about 6 years younger than me. So at a younger age, we beat the shit out of him like older brothers did. I mean, not like, put him in the hospital, but we were rough on him. But the tables turned as he got older, and now I wouldn't try to take him on, but as far as a kid, we had a great upcoming. You know, it was amazing.
Do you what do you remember, like, the first time you kind of felt the effects of drugs or alcohol?
Joe, I remember when we would go to my dad's, like he always worked. He's a mechanic, so he was always working. My grandparents were there taking care of us while he was working. And it always intrigued me because he'd leave an empty, half open beer down in his room for when he went to bed or whatever. And I'd be the one down there, like, sipping on his beer or, acting like I'm smoking his cigarette butts. And my older brother would be like, "What are you doing? That's so gross." I wanted to have that part. But one of the main things I remember, something about alcohol and the bottles intrigued me from a very young age. I remember at the age of 9, most kids collected cars or trading cards. My collection was the airplane bottles. And I started collecting those airplane bottles. And for years, I held on to those airplane bottles. Anytime my parents went somewhere, because I wasn't drinking them. I had no intention of ever smoking or drinking or doing any kind of drug or alcohol. I still to this day remember my fourth grade teacher, Mrs. Potter. She's like, "How many in here think they'll smoke a cigarette when they get older?" And I was disgusting. How could anybody even think about doing that? And that's just how I was born. I was born right. You don't drink, you don't smoke. You believe in God. And we didn't exactly go to church every Sunday, but I knew who God was. Well, I knew who I thought he was back then. Let me rephrase that. And I didn't have that relationship I have with him now.
Well, look. Well, I mean, I guess collecting airplane bottles is a pretty good sign. Were there any other signs, like, as you grew up, became a teenager and all that you might be at risk for addiction? Kind of looking back.
So at the age of 13, um, me and my brother were getting ready to go hunting, and we were in the house. Gun goes off, and I get shot in the gut, point blank range with the 20 gauge. And because I was always in school, I was one of the best at everything I did, fighting, kickball, baseball, anything. And so football, and then after I got shot, it was a very, basically, I wasn't supposed to make it through the night, you know, and so after this, I couldn't be that person anymore. For I mean, there was in the hospital for a couple months, and then it turns into back problems, because infection, and I'm not even able to do PE. I got to do special classes. The teachers are coming home, coming to the house to school me because I'm still healing. It took a while, and so at that point, I couldn't do the things that I used to love. And it wasn't right away. I was still, you know, like, drinking is wrong, drugging is wrong, but it led me, let me say, I started hanging out with a different crowd, and these different crowds had parents. And when I'd see them drink, then I saw them, how they'd act crazy and funny, and everybody loved them. And they talk about how great it was hanging out. And, I remember me and my friend one night were like, "Hey, we're going to drink tonight." I was like, "Okay, let's do. Everybody else is doing it, and they seem to be doing okay." And I got so drunk, and I remember the next day, my friend was just like beside himself that he had drank and how bad he felt. And I remember being like, "That was one of the most awesome times I've had." I never thought of the aftermath of it. Hey, you might have school tomorrow. You might have to go to work. You might have to do this. It was, I want to do this right now, and I don't want to stop. not like I don't ever want to stop, as a teenager. So it was, I just want this feeling to continue at any cost. And I would, and so then, through high school, I started drinking before school and smoking pot, and every once in a while, get a hold of a little speed. And that's, I lived in small towns though, so I didn't know people like, hey, let me go to the corner and get a bunch of drugs. It was, hey, someone has this, let's try it kind of deal early on, but, and, and then I went on my senior trip and I found my first love that I like to say, and that was called the beer bong. And you remember the old beer funnel? Oh my gosh, dude. And I was like, I can get drunk so quick on this, because my thing was always beer. It takes too long to get drunk, so let me start off with a little beer and then add a little whiskey. And now we're on the right path. And hopefully someone will come along with some other drug and we'll just intensify this party. But I remember coming back from my senior trip with this beer bong, and all my buddies were ready to relax because they were like partied out. And I was like, man, I'm going to introduce the town to this thing. I'm involving everybody. But, and so probably within a month of me getting back from my senior trip, I was in my first rehab. And it was kind of one of those things, like I didn't volunteer. It was kind of like my mom didn't know what the heck to do with me. So she's like, here, you need to go dry out. And I didn't know why I was there, Joe, but I knew that what it did to me, because I was still in that, uncomfortable zone of, I wanted to be a badass, but I couldn't be a badass. But I was like, but I get out of rehab and everybody's like, Brad went to rehab, almost like this person up here, like, holy shit, he's almost a criminal. We look at him different. He's been to rehab. And, I didn't go to the AA meetings that they told me to go to, and if I did, I was there for the wrong reason. I was 18 years old, looking at girls, anything. And, so it just, at that point, it wasn't, I kind of learned a little bit of a lesson that I needed to chill, but it was the beginning. It was the beginning. And then I moved to Altus, Ark. My mom had moved. And so my brother was in college. My younger brother was with his dad. And we moved to Altus, Arkansas, back to Arkansas. And I get a job at a winery. And so one of my first questions is, hey, what do you do with all the wine that you can't send out? And they're like, well, it's on a pallet over here. Just take what you want when you leave because it's all bad wine. And I was like, but does it still work? And they're like, well, absolutely. And so I made a lot of friends there in Altus, Arkansas, and and so it was I wanted to party all the time. If I was off work, I wanted to drink. I don't remember a lot of times when I was like, hey, I'm not doing nothing. I'm just going to go fishing without any drugs or alcohol involved. There was usually something involved.
So were you, do you remember moments, back then that you thought, man, I might have a problem. Maybe I should stop. I mean, rehab, again, it's kind of a hint, but we don't take hints very well. So,
no. For quite a few years though, there, Joe, like I would struggle keeping jobs, but I didn't think the jobs were that important. I didn't really have life figured out. I didn't know what I wanted to be. I had healed from everything by now, living a normal life, have friends, girlfriends. And then I had the opportunity. My parents moved, my mom and my stepdad moved to Las Vegas. And so then I got there, me and my girlfriend broke up and and I was like heartbroken and all this. And I was like, I'm moving to Vegas with them. And I started a career in plumbing. My stepdad got me into it. But also what I found in Las Vegas was speed, which, back then it was called crank, meth. And the thing I loved about that was I could work more and I had a clear mind when I was on it. Now I didn't make a lot of money, so I couldn't like buy bulk or anything. So I do it for a little bit. I don't remember having the effects of come downs and stuff like that. But in Vegas, that's when I was introduced to speed, and me and my girlfriend, we maintained. I actually had a kind of a normal life, but at any time I had any extra money, I would go buy speed. And it started turning out. She got pregnant, and now she was the one that was in Arkansas that was like, okay, I'm breaking up with you. Then I moved to Vegas. She's like, I want to come back out there with you. And I was like, well, heck yeah, this completes everything, and of course a woman, completes everything all the time. But then she got pregnant out there. We decided to move back to Arkansas, and that's when I started noticing, because as a child, I was always like, I want to have kids, I want to be married, I want to settle down, I want it to be great. And then as she was pregnant and couldn't, drink with me, she never really drank, and I never did drugs, never indulged in any of that. And, and so I got to get back to Arkansas, and I find people that have speed and stuff like that. And I remember that's when it started me staying out longer. I was able to buy more, making better money, and leaving her at home, her getting upset at what I was doing, the things I was doing when I was out. And, that's when it seemed like the more money I made, the more drugs I bought. I remember there toward the end, before she made the wise decision. We had, in this meantime, we had 3 kids. We had Max, Sierra, Phoenix. Found out that I had another one, Zachary. And love you, Zach. I love all of you very much. And so there toward the end, before she just made the wise decision to divorce me, and she told me one time, Joe, she said, "You know why I left you?" And I was like, "D, I just, I get it." She said, "I left you because I didn't want to hate you." And one night she's like, "What would you do if I did this to you all the time? Didn't come home?" I said, "I'd have left you a long time ago. I don't blame you for leaving me." Of course, I was under the influence and probably been up for 3 days at the time. And I was like, "Well, heck yeah, leave me. I'm on a roll." But then when it wears off, you see, you don't know what you got till it's gone. Because that poor woman, she never did anything wrong to me. And now she's happily married and does her thing, and I'm happy for her. And that's a life I live nowadays. I don't want to mess with anybody that's happy. It's a good thing, because I was on a path of not good, and she saw that it wasn't stopping. And so that's when it started taking a bad turn with drugs and hanging out. When she left, then meth was becoming a big problem. And I was, still, like I've said before, in a small town. And it's like people would find out. I knew enough people, they'd be like, "Hey, we got to cut Brad off. He's had enough," and that would happen sometimes. And then I'd have to do a come down. And, I had, lost a few jobs. And then I'd find more. I was good enough at what I did that I really didn't have to worry about work too much. And, but as we all know, that kind of plays out after years and years. People get fed up. So that's when it had the big turning point. Is I just, the more I made, the more I spent on alcohol and drugs, the more I did what I wanted to do. And I knew that when I was married to my wife and we had the kids, they were in the way of me doing what I wanted to do. Now, I wanted to say, "Hey, I love my kids. I'd do anything for them, blah, blah, blah." I did, as long as I had what I needed first. Because I would go and go and go. And I remember coming down, I'd have my kids, and I wouldn't be able to watch them. And, have my oldest for a few days and get a knock on the door from his grandma. And she'd be like, okay, I'm here to get Zach. And I'd be like, well, Zach ain't here. And then he walks out of the back bedroom, you know? And that's not healthy for a father to be like. And, you know, so there's a lot of those times when I just wasn't there, or if I, you know, I wasn't there mentally. I might have been there physically, but I didn't even know my own kids were there. And so it got bad. It got real bad.
So what was the lowest point, Brad? Do you know, when you're in your addiction?
Joe, I had a girlfriend one time, and she told me one time, because like I said, I lived in a small town. She said, if you ever lived in a big city, you'd be dead. And so I had, between what I'm about to tell you and what, and there's probably about 10 or 15 years in here that really just kind of, you know, getting on different things, you know, drinking, get on antabuse, get on pills, get on methadone, you know, be on methadone for years and just, you know, nod out and burn everything. And, you know, I've been to a couple more rehabs. My second rehab was in North Arkansas. You know, got kicked out of there because women, you know. And when I left, you know, the first thing I had to have was a girlfriend and all that stuff. And, you know, doing it for the wrong reasons. And then my third rehab was in a little town in Arkansas. Probably you know, this one is probably where I understood addiction. It was a very poor, small treatment center in a little town called Gassville, Arkansas, and it was called Omart. And I remember being there, and after about 3 days, I was talking to my mom on the phone. I was like, "This place really ain't for me. You know, these stupid classes, and it's poor, and you know, we're eating poor." And come to find out here in a little bit, that's the best thing that ever happened to me. But a gentleman came in one day, Joe. You know, I was probably planning on leaving the next day, and you know, this is how God works, you know. And his name was David B. And still text him every morning. You know, just man, he's up there. He's freaking up there with me. And he came in and he explained what was going on in my head, and he started talking about the dopamine effect. You know, about the feel good sensations and how high they'd take you, and then how low, and, you know, and how God was working in our lives and got me involved in church, and like that whole community, that whole recovery community was like, man, David B, you know, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, dude, he's my sponsor. And, you know, and then another guy came in and he explained more of addiction and what it was doing to me and why I was feeling that way. And, you know, I was up there, got in outpatient, of course, got kicked out again, you know, for a woman. And so then I get this job offer, and I'm doing good, you know, and family's starting to see that I'm doing good, you know, which I should have been left up there because I was maintaining. But I remember my brother calling, and he's like, hey, well, how would you like to come to Atlanta? You know, got a job offer for you, you know, this much, blah, blah, blah. So now we've changed from women to more money again. Okay. Absolutely. You know, and I remember there's an old timer at one of the meetings, and I introduced, you know, I'm going to Atlanta. You know, I'm 6 months clean. I'm going to Atlanta, and I'll make some good money and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, you're making the biggest mistake of your life. And I was like, why the hell would you say that to me? He's like, you're not ready. He said, you're leaving this town of 3,000 people, and you're going to a town of millions. You don't know anybody. You know, I was like, but look at the money I'm making. You know, what could go wrong? As my good friend Jimmy would say, what could go wrong? You know, well, let me tell you what could go wrong. So, of course, I have it all mapped out. You know, I've got all the AA literature, and I've got all where all the meetings are. And I get there, and the first night I go to a meeting, and the second night I go to a meeting, but I'm so lonely, Joe. I am so lonely. And finally get to a year, and I go back to Arkansas and I pick up my chip and I took my daughter with me and I'm like, here, this is for that 1 year. And a week after that, I'm down on Pensacola Beach drinking. And then I was like, okay, that wasn't right, but I don't have to do it no more. So, let me do everything I can that isn't illegal, whether it be ephedrine pills or I don't know if you've ever had a kratom. It's kind of like a synthetic pain pill. It doesn't really it took away my feeling of loneliness. And they sold it in capsules. Well, within a week, I'm in there buying these kilogram bags of it, because I just can't get enough. And they're like, what are you doing with this? I'm like, I'm taking it, and so then the drinking progressed and then I got drunk one night and I went looking in Atlanta and I had my oldest son with me. And, I was like, well, if I just stick with cocaine, I'll be all right. Who can ever get hurt with cocaine? So we go out. I'm drunk. He's drunk. We find cocaine. Did it. Next day, no big deal. And then we go out a couple weeks later, and he's, I'll get anytime I'd get drunk, I'd always want to go find something. Drinking was always my gateway because it gave me. I sorry to say, but it gave me balls. And in Atlanta, you needed them. The places I was going, because you didn't just drive to these places. And I go there one night, and I'm like, hey, I want some cocaine. He's like, well, I didn't have as much as you wanted, so I threw a little of this meth in there for you. And I was like, shit, I didn't want to go down this path. And I remember doing it that night. My son woke up the next day, and I was beside myself, because I had to go get more. And I was like, how am I going to tell my son I have to go feed this dragon? And finally I was like, hey, I just got to tell you, I got to go. And I don't think I showed up for a couple nights. And he's like, I'd go straight to my room and, hey, nobody's going to know what's going on with me. And so then he would get intrigued. And he would do drugs with me. I had no friends out there, except for the people, except for just the people on the street. And so I brought my son into this with me, and then we started doing meth and we started doing heroin. And I met more suppliers and for a year and a half, I had an endless supply of meth and heroin and anything I wanted. And I tried to involve anybody I ran into with it, whether it be my coworkers, whether it be my kids, it didn't matter. I wanted you, whether I'd come back home to Arkansas and I'd find friends and I'd be like, let's get on this. And that was my low with drugs. I didn't care who you were. I didn't care what your circumstance. If you wanted to do anything with me, we were getting high. And this involved my kids. So I could say, without a shadow of a doubt, that's the worst. That's the low right there. Is doesn't get much lower than that for me. But it did. Joe. And I knew it finally came to a point that I knew God. I knew that addiction. It had me for the first. There's other times in my life. I'd get messed up, and I'd stay out there for a while, but I never really thought. It didn't have me. I could quit it, but this time it had me. It had me, and I couldn't stop. And I couldn't stop every single day, day in, day out. And I didn't know what to do, dude. I didn't know what to do. And I didn't know where to turn. I tried to be spiritual, but I crossed that line too. I thought, but it's like I remember the last time I went in. And the main reason for me, when I say go in, I was in Atlanta and I drove to Arkansas. And the main reason for me going in was to say bye. Not like, hey, bye kids, you're never going to see me again. But in my heart, I knew it was goodbye. They weren't going to see me again. My mom wasn't going to see me again. You know, I have the letters still to this day in my Men's Living Sober book of what it felt like saying goodbye to your kids, not and your mom, and not being able to stop for them. You know, even when on the last time I went in, you know, I was at my daughter's, and everybody thought I was messed up, but they didn't know to the extent. And she had asked me for a cigarette, and I gave her my pack of cigarettes, and she came to me and she said, "What the F is this?" You know, and I had forgot that I had a 8 ball of heroin in there. And, you know, she could, you know, this is how bad I was. She could understand if it would have been pills or maybe cocaine, but you know, heroin is that one. You know, it's like holy shit, you're in the depths of it now, and she's like, you got to call David. You know, you got to get into treatment. And I was like, oh, absolutely, blah blah blah. You know, and I'll first thing in the morning get a hold of him. And of course, morning comes, and hey, sis, I gotta go. She said, you're gonna die. I said, no. You know. I mean, most people, if they're an alcoholic or an addict, they know. You know, we tell whatever we have to get back out there. You know, and so so I remember leaving, and she was just sitting there on her couch as I was walking out the door. And she's like, I guess you just got to go you do what you got to do. And I was like, yeah, you know, I do. And me knowing in my heart, I'm never going to see her again. This is how I'm leaving, you know. And at this time, my whole family is basically in shambles because, as you probably know, alcohol doesn't just affect us, or drugs doesn't just affect us. It affects everybody around us. And if you were around me, I had basically already turned your life toxic. You know, my youngest son had joined the Army, and he told me, he said, Dad, when I get out and before I go to Ranger school, this is how good he fucking did. He said, don't take me home to be around my friends again. I said, no problem, Max. Well, when he gets out, I have to make a run home. And I take him back. And he didn't go back to the Army, you know. And so my oldest son was down in Texas getting busted with his buddies for heroin and meth. My son Phoenix was getting out of a bad relationship, was having, you know, some mental issues. And where was I? Nowhere to be found in any of this. The worst thing, you know, I could, you know, the dad that isn't there, you know. So don't even call me a dad at this point. I don't even want to be recognized as a dad, as much of a failure as I've been and as I was. My mom worried to death. My older brother, you know, worried to death. My younger brother worried to death. I didn't care. A friend I would go see, I'd be like, hey, man, I'm going to come over to your house tonight. Maybe we can. He's like, don't show up at my house. Don't ever show up at my house. You're an embarrassment. I was like, well, you're sitting here, you know, doing heroin with me. Yeah, but you take it to a different level. And everybody knows. And he's like, and you don't need to go back to rehab because all you do is embarrass your family. And I was like, well, where else do I go? You know, but rehab wasn't even an option. And it was right around then when I was talking to a buddy, and I was like, man, I'm in it. I'm in it, Brother Kenny. And I was like, what do I have to do? How can I stop all this? And he's like, you got to make a promise to God. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, what do you love the most? I was like, drugs. And he, you know, kind of gasped. He's like, you know, more than your kids, more than your family. I was like, yeah, right now, That's my biggest concern is I'm going to run out of drugs and alcohol. Which, once I started on drugs after drinking, alcohol was in the back door. I was out there, and he's like, well, you got to stop him right now. I said, I'll have to get with God later. And it wasn't at that instant, but it's almost like it's like God's up there. He said, this is what you want. I'm gonna let you experience what you're choosing right now. And of course, I'm not like talking with him because I think he has nothing to do with me. I have forgotten the word God. I've forgotten who God is. I ain't looking for nothing. I know I'm in the pit of hell, and I am existing. And existing became punishment. And it got dark. And it got eerie. And it's almost as if I was rotting. Smells became different. I don't remember for the last week. I don't remember the sun shining a bit. I remember times, Joe, and people, I've heard different people talk about it, but and some people are like, oh, you done too much, or you were high, or whatever, and but he let me experience things, and I remember one time, everything went still, everything went quiet. I was looking outside, nothing moved. I was trying to call people. The phone didn't work. And basically, I was in this quiet world of just Brad. And it's almost like he said, well, this is what you wanted. You wanted more of you. And it would stop and it'd get dark. And, it was the loneliest, coldest, darkest I had ever felt in my life. But I wasn't quitting. I still wasn't quitting. Because I didn't really know what was going on at the time. But like now that I look back, I understand that, he was talking to me. He's like, this is, if this is what you want, this is what you get. You can have it. You do not have to choose me. I don't have to be a part of your life. And I was like, okay, I wouldn't want to be a part of this life either. And so being in the worst part of my life, luckily, God's still working. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Even when we don't think he's working. And if we're not paying attention, he's working through someone else because he can't get to us. Because I was this stream of pollution, and there was no way I was letting him in. Well, I got back out. I had by this time I'm working in Wilmington, North Carolina, and I'm out there and I'm at my demise. Still trying to show up for work, but just barely getting out of the motel room. And I go to work one day, and one of the guys on the job, I'm drove off the job site long enough to go get high again, and by this time I'm not even getting high. I'm just using drugs because I don't know. They took me away from me. I don't know. There was no high left. There was no enjoyment left of anything. Right. It was just mental anguish and physical anguish. And, my hips were out. My back was out. I was like almost like the hunchback of Notre Dame. And this is no bullshit. I was like walking on like a 45-degree angle because I had destroyed myself. And I pull off the job site, and a buddy, one of the workers, he's like, hey, man, why'd you get a pipe rack on your truck? And I was like, I don't have a pipe rack on my truck. And I was like, oh, shit, my brother's on site because we work for the same company. And I was like, something's probably about to go down. And I get there, and, I called him. I was like, hey, you're on the job site. And he's like, yeah, you coming back? And I was like, yeah, why wouldn't I come back? What could be wrong? It's like, I'm doing great. And he's like, all right, I'll see you in a bit. And I get there, and he says, come on. He says, hand me your keys. I gave him my keys. And of course, my mom's on the phone call, and she says, Bradley, do you want to stop? I said, I want to stop. I just can't, and then we talked to my boss, and he's like, hey, man, just go get better. We got you. Go get better, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just out of my mind high, and, or I don't know of course I was high as much as I was using or whatever, but, I was just like, okay, maybe this is all going to be okay. And I'm still, had pockets full, had money, had pockets full, for the first time in my life. I'm not going to treatment because I've run out, or for someone else, or for a girl, or for anything else. I have an opportunity, and I didn't look at none of it like this, Joe. I have an opportunity to get better. But I knew, it's like they say in the rooms, if I don't quit, I'm going to die. If I quit, I'm going to die. And that's where I was. I was like, this is going to be bad. And, so they got me to go to a treatment center, and I don't really remember detox, but, I told you I'd forgotten all about God. And this is where AA saved my life. This is right before the pandemic in 2020. And they brought AA into the treatment center. And I, hobbled down, of course, I'm messing myself and throwing up and barely able to walk, barely eating. And I hobbled down because it's an AA meeting. I remember, that's where I'd met David. And I knew that there was good people in there. And I didn't want to be in there. And they said, let's say the Serenity Prayer. And I'll never, ever, ever forget, Joe. It's almost as if God was sitting up there, and he's in his recliner, and he's just waiting on me. And he's like, say it. Say it. Just say it. Don't write it. Don't think it. Don't nothing. Say it. And I remember that first word of the Serenity Prayer. And I said, God, out loud. And those hairs on the back of my neck stood up. And I started bawling. And I was like, man, I forgot about you. And it's like he blew. And he's like, I didn't forget about you. And I said, man, maybe there is a chance. Now, it didn't get real good there for a little bit. He wasn't like, okay, everything's going to be just peachy from here on out. It was like, it's like he came around. It's like every once in a while he'd come out around the door and see those demons and the things I chose over him just beating the shit out of me. And me being, okay, I've had enough of that. And he'd be like, nah, no, you hadn't yet. You're going to take some more ass whipping. And I'm going to see where you're at with me. And so I started getting a little healthier day by day. I was able to walk, eat, a little nutrition. I was almost brain fried. I remember the first time, like there's steps to recovery. Like you come out of detox, you go to your next step, and they bring you colors. It's like, here's 8 colors. Let's see what I was like. Oh my God, yay! I can color a clown, and that's where I was at. I was just, or then the next thing, they go to your next phase. Oh, now you're able to get thread. Oh, now I can braid a bracelet, dude. And that became my life for like a month, dude. I just did crayons and I made little bracelets. And, but the whole time, in recovery for me, they're trying to introduce, hey, let's do these crystals and see how you're doing, or let's do this thing called Reiki, or let's put these probes on your head and try to dwell in there, do your thoughts. And I tried all of them. And the only things that I needed was the Bible and the AA book. And I started reading the Old Testament, and I started forming this relationship with God as a father, you know, as everything. And then I'd go to my AA meetings, and then it seemed like everything was correlating with each other, like whether it be surrendering or to our new employer. One of my favorite parts. I mean, when I first read that, I was like, "Oh, I'm getting a new job." It's but this new father, he doesn't always treat me perfectly, or he treats me perfectly in his world, but I don't always get what I want. But I get what he knows I need, and I found, and this is in COVID, so there was hardly any meetings, and there was hardly any churches. And one night I was out looking for a grocery store in Wilmington, North Carolina, and I took this wrong turn. And all of a sudden I come across this church, and on the sign, it's like, we do have service on Sundays. Now, you had to sit in your vehicle and tune in, but I had somewhere to go get my God, on Sundays. And then I met an amazing group of guys in Wilmington, North Carolina, and there was no meetings, and they're like, we're having meetings, because I tried to Zoom, I'll Zoom if I have to, but I needed that human interaction of different people like me. There was one that was a police officer, one was a land developer, one worked on the railroad, one was a scientist, one worked for the government. And then they started inviting me into their homes, and hey, let's have big book studies. And I'm pretty sure, I was kind of like that dude that they'd be like, let's invite Brad because this is some funny shit, and we'll get a kick out of this. But and they're just like, keep coming back. And I'd see people come in them rooms, and I'd start going to the recovery centers with them. This AA family, this new people that just loved, and they loved what they did, and we'd go out and eat, and we'd have fun. And then, I met my sponsor down in Wilmington, Warren, and we sat there in his truck before the meeting every day, and we'd talk about, he did construction, I did construction, and read that big book, and I'd meet more people, and then I'd sponsor someone, and then I'd see another person come in just like zombified. Those ones that sometimes come in the meeting, you're like, I don't see a chance in hell they're making it out of here. And then you see them slowly progress, and you start seeing the miracles of this program and what God can do. And you start helping at conventions, and then I'd have to move, and that's probably one of the hardest things in what I do is about every year or two I move, and then I go to Greenville, South Carolina. But I've learned by now, you dig in. You start going to meetings. You start meeting people. You start getting phone numbers. There for about a year, then I moved to Knoxville. And it takes me a bit, because I'm not a trusting person. I'm pretty sure that all alcoholics and addicts are very trusting people, and they trust everybody. But I'm not. It takes me a bit. And then one day in Knoxville, dude, I'm at the Park 40. And this guy comes to my truck, and I'm like, I wonder what the hell he wants. And he's just talking to me. And I don't have a sponsor. And he's just talking, and I'm like, God dang, how long is he going to talk to me? And finally, I'm like, dude, do you want to be my sponsor? And he's, just kind of, if you don't have one, yeah, I guess I will. And he's like, well, here, come to this meeting. And I go to the Friday night meeting, and then all of a sudden, this woman's like, well, hey, there's a men's meeting, and there's a secret code to the door. And I was like, I have arrived, son. Dude, I have arrived. And I wrote that code down. I wrote down them names, and I went to that and got more involved, and, went to a men's retreat. And, it, I have to get out of my comfort zone on those things. Because I wish I could say that every newcomer I see come into an AA room, I'm just like, oh man, it's the greatest freaking thing ever. You're gonna have a blast. Can't wait to see it. It's sometimes AA people or anybody. I can't just say AA people. I don't need to put that label on them, but we're reluctant. I'm sometimes kind of reluctant. Like, are they in here for the right reason? Who the hell am I to judge? But I do, you know, I do all the time. I'll sit in a room and I know everybody and I'm still judging their ass, blah, 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 you know, but then I go through the meeting, I'm a little bit better, you know? So, you know, I just try to love and tolerate and invite God into my life as much as I can anymore. And, you know, I meet friends in AA. You know, I go to the dinners. You know, I'm able to ask a woman to go to dinner nowadays, and the first thought not be, you know, oh, well, can't wait for it to be over so I can get in her pants. You know, most of those thoughts are. I mean, of course they linger, but I don't have to act on that shit no more. You know, it's it's an amazing deal. And then of course I have to move again. Now I'm in Charlotte, you know, and I'm finally, you know, I've been here for about 4 months. I think I went to Raleigh first for a couple months. Now I'm in Charlotte and I'm getting, you know, found me a home group and you know, getting more involved. You know, they're still not my Knoxville peeps yet. And they're still not my Wilmington, you know, bros that I still text every day that saved my life, you know. But it takes a bit, you know, but it ain't gonna work if I just sit around and do nothing. You know, I've got to get out there. I've got to get out. I think you said before we were talking, you know, this like stuff like this gets me out of my comfort zone. You know, and it does. It's a beautiful thing. And but at the time, you know, I don't see it as a beautiful thing. I'm like, shit, you know, it's like I'm calling my sponsor Jimmy. I'm like, I got all this anxiety. What am I? Oh, you're gonna do fine. You know, he's just very calming. You know, everybody's like, oh, you're gonna do great. And you know, they're probably in there like, I was the same way before you did. You know, but it's just an amazing deal, dude. And it my kids are back around. You know, um, text them every day. Talk to most of them. They still have some of their issues. You know, but I'm there to answer their phone calls. You know, I talk to my mom. I text her every day. Talk to her a couple times a week, and she's not looking for me in the dumpster no more. You know, she's not worried to death about me. You know, she knows I still isolate a little bit, and I get in my head, but you know, it's like not 911 stuff. You know, work is better than it's ever been. It's like, you know, I look over these last 5 years, and I'm like, where has this life been? And it's been right here. But I can't look back. You know what I mean? I could just keep looking. Well, I don't want to look too far forward because I'll be thinking about how hot it's going to be on Monday, and I'll be like, oh my gosh, you know, I'm never going to make it to that. You know, which for anybody that's listening, it's supposed to be 101 in Charlotte on Monday and Tuesday. So I'm not looking forward to it. But you know, I like to just try my best to stay in the present and like a friend of mine said in the program, you know, I hear a lot of these good things. You know, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. You know, and sometimes I just got to find my feet because my feet are in tomorrow and yesterday. But when I can stay grounded, you know, to what's going on, I can have some pretty good times with God. You know, and it's those times when I can shed some tears, and it's just me and him. And dude, it's like, give me more, give me more. And he's like, I can't give you too much because you'll forsake me and you'll think you get it all the time, which it says in the Lord's Prayer, you know, give me my bread, my daily bread. And he knows how much to give me, just enough for the day. Because he knows if he was to give me a whole damn loaf on Monday, I'd eat the whole sumbitch by Tuesday. And then the rest of the week, I ain't got no bread to eat. And that's how I look at it, you know. He knows I need increments. And anyway, blessing this program and God.
Well, I think you're a blessing too, brother.
You didn't ask me any
Really.
questions this whole
Oh, I'm
time.
about to. Oh, I'm about
Oh,
to.
dude.
So, what would you say to somebody, Brad, who's in that dark place right now, who is feeling hopeless? You know,
Have faith. Have faith. Dig deep, because that darkness can't end. It's if you are living and breathing, then there is still light out there. Don't give in anymore. But it has to start somewhere, and it has to start within. I have to surrender myself, wave that flag. Like another buddy of mine said, it's like being in an MMA fight and this dude is just beating the shit out of you. Addiction, it whooped me. I tapped. I don't want no more. Don't want no more. I think my good friend Jack, I'm stealing a lot of people's lines here. My good friend Jack from Knoxville, I think he's the one that said that. But, tap out. Tap out. It's okay because we're here.
Well said, sir. Well, I appreciate you sharing your experience, strength, and hope, my friend. But I cannot let you go without our rapid fire questions. I know you've been looking forward to it, Brad.
I try to listen to your podcast, and I'll be like, I'm going to be ready for these. And it's like,
that's an unfair advantage right there. That's trying to get an unfair advantage.
I couldn't do it.
Are you ready, sir? Are you ready?
Not really, but
that's good. It's perfect time to start when you're not ready. What is your favorite recovery slogan?
One day at a time. One day at a time.
What is your?
Go ahead.
Yep. No, you go ahead.
No, when I first came in, I was like, how ignorant. Of course, we have to live one day at a time. How do we get from Monday to Tuesday? And then I started realizing that I'm not capable. God didn't invent me to take more days at a time. There's the day, then there's the night, then I leave it behind as best I can, and start the next day over new and refreshed. One day at a time.
What's your least favorite recovery slogan?
Let go and let God, because I can't do it. It's like, it pisses me off, and it's like, well, just let go and let God. And I'm like, okay, yeah. It's not that I don't like it. It's that, man, it's tough. It is tough to let him have everything.
Yeah. What do you think is your sobriety superpower?
Man, relating to the newcomer, and not being ashamed to tell it like it is. I don't like to sugarcoat. If I don't understand something, I'll tell you I don't understand. If I think something, or if I think a newcomer is doing something off the wall, I'm pretty blunt about it. Well, quit being an idiot. Maybe this won't happen. Don't go buy that car without a driver's license. On the simple stuff that most of the people that I, have run across do, and it's that simple stuff that's the molehills, the mountains that we think are the mountains, but they're molehills. It's just like, slow it down. And, the tortoise and the hare, man. I don't have to be the rabbit no more.
No, me neither, my brother. If you could say one thing to your former self, what would it be?
Golly, if you could say one thing to your former self, what would it be? I love you. I love you. We went through some shit, but I love you, because I don't know where I'd be without him. You know what I mean? There's stuff that maybe I shouldn't have done, but there's also some pretty good things that came from him. It wasn't always horrible. And so, Bradley, I love you. And I love who I am now, and that's what my sponsor tells me, be happy with who you are. because that's one of my big deals is self. I sit there and beat myself up when I'm really, at the end of the day, I try not to do anything wrong.
What song do you play to lift your spirits when you need a boost?
Oh man, it depends on probably one of the oldest ones is I'm gonna say right now it's Zach Williams, Friends in High Places. Christian music. Now sometimes I'll be there at 10 o'clock at night and something will come across YouTube and I'll be like, I need to put that on my library. And it'll be one of them songs that gets your pride and your ego way up there. And I'll listen to it about one time and be like, we got to get this off because, it's hard for me, Joe, because I get bigger than myself. I went to my first non-Christian concert 2 weeks ago. I went and saw Metallica in a stadium. But I went with a recovery buddy, my buddy Kenny, and my nephew Caleb. And it's the first rock concert I'd been to sober, and I had an amazing time. It was cool. I still like that old music, but I gotta stay on that straight and narrow. And I had to listen to some Lauren Daigle, some Yusei, just uplifting, loving kind of music.
Yeah. If you could grant yourself one wish to help with your recovery, what would it be?
Grant myself one wish to help. You were cutting out a little bit. If I could grant myself one wish to help with my recovery?
Mm-hmm.
Oh. Man. No wishes here. No wishes here. I just, God's got me where he wants me, whether I like it or not. Sometimes, I don't believe in the genies,
All right. What step do you love the most?
I was looking at that earlier. I think number 6. We're entirely ready.
What step do you love the least?
Oh shit. I don't know if I have a least. I guess there's still some amends out there. I don't know how to take care of. And I don't bring them up. Some of that stuff that is just it's in my mind, but I haven't addressed it yet. Whether they are passed away or distant, and it's like I almost don't want to stir them up, and because right, how we get in recovery. Sometimes if everything's okay, but then comes that day when it's like it ain't okay. So making amends.
Fair enough. That's a tough one. What is one of your favorite movies?
Oh man, Lords of Dogtown. You ever seen it?
No, but now I'm gonna have to.
Oh, dude, it's a skateboard movie of when Pal Peralta, kind of Stacy Peralta and the Z Boys back in California when they just starting their. It was always just me and my kids would watch it, and still to this day they're like Lords of Dogtown or Silent Hill for a scary one. Those are just the memories I have watching them with my kids.
Cool. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Come on in. Come on in.
I like it. Man. Thank you so much for taking the time today, Brad, and sharing your experience, strength, and hope, brother. Just so everyone knows, a new episode is released every Thursday at noon. You can listen to the show in your favorite podcast apps, Apple, Podbean, Spotify, YouTube, and others. Just search for The Cup of Joe Show. Don't forget the "the." Please like, follow, subscribe, and share because somebody out there needs to hear this today. Y'all have a good day.
God bless.
It's just a laid back vibe, baby.
We hope you enjoyed today's experience, strength, and hope. We are so grateful you decided to join us. Please share this episode with someone who might need it. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. Remember, no matter where you are in your recovery journey, you are not alone. Reach up and reach out to someone. Please do not suffer in silence. Until next time, let's take it 1 minute, 1 hour, and 1 day at a time. Thanks for listening to the Cup of Joe Show.